Hey, it's George from Triangulated back again this week. And this is going to be a slightly different video from the other ones. I've basically been asked, what am I selling? And so there's a couple things I'm selling, and I decided to make a few videos to explain what I'm selling and why. So this video, sorry, in particular, is going to talk about the research that I sell, and it's going to go through how the research works and related details. So I will do a little screen share here so I can walk you through an actual report. And let me try to zoom a little bit. So the company is Triangulated Research LLC, and the report is called the Stock Market Strategist. And these reports follow a pretty fixed format, which I'm going to walk you through right now. So basically, it starts with a summary of what the report's about. This is just a one or two liner that kind of goes over the high points. Not much more to explain there. And then in every report, what I do is I share executive quotes for the week. So let me back up a little bit and talk about sort of the grist for the mill that is this research report. So what I do is I read transcripts from earnings calls or other corporate calls for 30 to 60 minutes almost every day. And in doing so, you see consistencies in what the various executives say. And eventually you can, quote unquote, triangulate, hence the name of the company, what they're saying and identify trends and see which way the wind is blowing, so to speak. So that's really the underlying basis for this report. Everything is fueled by what executives are saying. Well, most things are fueled by that. So let me jump back in here. So for executive quotes of the week, what I'm doing here is just sharing a handful of different quotes that come from corporate executives and transcripts that talk about the trends that their business is subject to. So here, for example, is TransUnion, and they're talking about how there are $10 million of mortgages with rates above 6%, creating significant refi population if average rates fall below 6%. Alternatively, we've got Euronet Worldwide saying inflation and prices remain the top financial challenges facing U.S. customers. Then we've got Vontier saying secular tailwinds include digitalization, and energy expansion. And I could go on, but I think you get the idea. This is basically just a diverse smattering of the commentary that I'm seeing that represents the secular trends, which I focus on later in the report. So that's basically part one. Then part two is what I call the markets review. And that's me looking at what prices are doing in stocks and stock sectors and macro markets and other things to try to determine what message the markets are sending. Bruce Kovner, who's a market wizard, had a famous comment that was, listen to the markets, listen to what the market is telling you. And I believe that if you watch markets long enough, you can really start to come up with a message that they're sending, and you can use that to potentially trade or otherwise inform what is going on. So once a week, I go through that and I basically look at what the markets are doing, what they're saying, and share my interpretation of their message. On this page, I also have indicators. So there's really four primary indicators that I look at related to stocks. One is the long-term trend as to whether that's up or down. Two is volatility. What I've found over time is that when volatility gets very high, it can be difficult to trade or to manage money because you can wind up getting stopped out or just experience difficult times because the volatility is hard to stomach. Three is interest rates. If rates get high enough, people are just going to put money into bonds. And if they get low enough, money's going to go anywhere else. There's shades of gray in between, but I'll look at what interest rates are doing and try to interpret what that means in a general sense for investing in stocks. And then finally, the Federal Reserve, they set interest rates. And so watching what they do and what their plan is on interest rates can be very helpful to figure out the right way to go in the markets. Finally, on this page, I have a generic tactical model that tells how much money is exposed to stocks at the time. So right now, that's 100%. It could be full cash. It is long only, but it goes between not invested at all to fully invested in shades of gray in between. So this page is really the market section that goes through what the markets are doing, what the indicators are saying, and that's kind of a top-down look at what stocks are saying and what the different markets are saying. Okay, from there, each week I have a specific secular trend that I focus on. And what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll explain the trend and share the latest evidence that I'm seeing, which is typically from executives and is always motivated by executives, but sometimes I'll share other things. But for example, this week, what I'm talking about is cloud and cloud migration and how companies are continuing to migrate away from on-prem or on-premises to putting their workflows essentially in the cloud to save money on cost, to have business redundancy, and also the ongoing AI craze. Data centers is just creating more and more cloud demand. So once I've outlined a trend and explained it, I'll basically go through and show you the evidence, some of the evidence that I'm seeing. Usually there's way more behind the scenes, but I found over time people don't want to read 50 comments. So here, for example, we've got Alphabet, Google talking about the significant growth in their cloud business, Amazon saying the same, Microsoft saying the same, Oracle talking about how they're seeing significant and unprecedented demand for cloud services. So yeah, that's basically it. I'll just go through and I'll show you what I'm seeing from my research, and I'll then say, what this is the way the wind is blowing essentially for these trends. I also identified beneficiary stocks. A lot of people say, well, what's the best stock for a trend? That's really hard to determine because it depends on the person asking the question. Are you a value guy? Are you a growth guy? Are you small cap? Are you large cap? There's really no one best stock without the benefit of hindsight and determining how you measure best. But what I tried to do is I take this combination of larger cap companies who say that they benefit from the trend in their own words, and then I cross-reference that against what hedge funds hold. The idea being that if 1,000 hedge funds own one stock and 2 own another, there's probably a reason 1,000 own that stock. It's probably a better stock. So that becomes one of several that provide exposure to trends. Now, I don't do buy this here, sell it here. I just don't play that game in this letter. And really what this letter is about, in my mind, is me doing legwork and aggregating information from corporate executives and sharing that, as well as, interpreting price action. Okay, so the next section is top trends and stocks. And so this is where I basically keep a running tally on what are the top trends as evidenced by how much executives are talking about them, how popular they are elsewhere, Twitter, places like that. X, sorry, not Twitter. And I'll identify the trends, AI and data centers, and then the beneficiary stocks, which come from the process that I just described up here. So there's basically always a running tally of this is where the strongest trends live at the moment. And finally, in response to people saying, well, what can I do with this? A lot of people can figure out what to do with this on their own. But if you're not one of those people, I have a simplified version of a money management model that I run in my money management business that is a concentrated tactical portfolio. And so what it offers is basically exposure to stocks that are heavily owned by hedge funds and also subject to the secular trends that result from this research. And there, the weights can range between full cash and fully invested, which would be 100%. I wrote a related post about this that really goes into this, and I'll probably make a video about it soon. But that's kind of it at a high level. So let me go through one additional report just to give you a little bit more flavor so you can see it again. So here we have, again, the summary of the week. This week's report was about bathroom camping, which is actually sort of a deviation from the norm, but we'll get into that in a minute. And then I go into the executive commentary. Again, all of this comes from corporate transcripts. These are things that you really can't search for on Google. You have to have access to a database of corporate transcripts to get this information. And here you can see we've got Timken talking about automation, passenger rail, renewable energy, et cetera. F5 talking about hybrid cloud adoption. Basically, this is just going to be a collection of trends, secular trends, surveys, results, things that executives are seeing that can help to inform whatever decisions you may want to make. Again, the market's review, interpreting what prices are doing, looking at the indicators, and then having a tactical model that tells you how much exposure you should probably have to the stock market based on my models and how I think of the world. I could go more into that later if you're interested. But okay, and then we get into a secular trend. It's not always a secular trend, I should say. Sometimes if I see something new, I will point it out because it could become a big thing. And so this week's, for example, was bathroom camping. I saw this in the commentary of Clorox, an executive from the Clorox company. And they basically said that Gen Z does something called bathroom camping, where they just retreat to the bathroom with their devices, headphones, maybe a blanket or a snack, and they spend time in there to reset their nervous system. And I thought this was a one-off because they were the only company talking about it, but then I read an article on Vice that basically proved that it is a phenomenon. So as to whether that becomes a secular trend is hard to say, but I thought it was interesting enough to share. It's certainly a social reality in the world today for younger generations. That is another example of something that I'll do in the secular trend section, and then I'll have the sections on the top trends and stocks and the concentrated tactical secular trend portfolio. So those are two examples using recent reports of how the research works. What other details can I give you here? Okay, so I charge $300 a year for this report. You get at least 44 reports a year. Usually it's more than that. I enjoy doing this. It sort of empowers what I do in terms of my own trading or investing. I don't take too many weeks off, but I distribute it via Substack. I'll provide a link to that below. What else can I say? The concentrated portfolio that I mentioned, I'll provide a link that really goes over that and probably make another video in the near future. And I think that's it. So that is a quick and dirty overview of what I'm doing on the research front. And, feel free to reach out if you have other questions or you'd like to know more. Thanks for watching.